Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to admit something. When I first saw today's topic, I had this flashback to fourth grade.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the giant pull-down maps, memorizing state capitals.
Yeah.
It all felt a little dry.
That's a really common reaction. We tend to think of geography as just the static backdrop. It's the board, but it's not the game, right?
Exactly. And especially now, we're told we live in the flat world. We've got the internet, we have Zoom, global finance. It feels like technology just completely conquered distance. If I want to talk to someone in Tokyo, it's a click of a button. Borders just feel like these old-fashioned lines on a screen.
Well, that is the modern illusion. It's a very comforting thought that ideas matter more than, mountains and rivers. But the book we're looking at today is here to just shatter that idea.
Okay, so what are we diving into?
We're looking at The Revenge of Geography by Robert D. Kaplan, and his core argument is basically this. You can ignore the map, but the map is not ignoring you.
Kaplan is grabbing us by the shoulders and saying, look down. He calls geography the original fact of history. And it hasn't just not gone away. It's coming back with a vengeance.
And Kaplan's interesting because he's not some armchair academic. He's a travel writer who pivoted to geopolitics. So he has this very sensory, boots on the ground feel.
Right.
And he thinks we've become blinded by our gadgets. We think we're floating up in the cloud, but nations still act the way they do because of the relief map, the physical world.
So our mission today is to see if he's right. We're going to explore why a mountain range might dictate a country's politics more than its constitution. We'll dig into some pretty heavy theories from a century ago that seem to predict today's news.
And we'll ask the big question, is our destiny just written in the rock?
Or maybe does the rock just determine the hand we're dealt?
I like that. That's a broad way to put it.
Okay, let's start with a view from the ground. Kaplan tells this one story from 1986. He's in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. And I think this story just nails the difference between a political map and a real map.
It really does. So he's in a car with a Kurdish driver, and they're heading north. Now, on a political map from 1986, it's all just one country, one color, Iraq.
Right, one dictator.
Exactly. But as they're driving across these flat plains, the driver just looks out the window and practically spits the word Arabistan.
Arabistan.
Land of the Arabs. For him, that flat land, it represented the reach of Saddam's secret police. Tanks can roll easily on flat ground. There's just nowhere to hide. It's a landscape of control.
Okay.
But then the terrain starts to change, and they see the mountains of Kurdistan rising up on the horizon.
And the whole mood shifts.
Completely. The driver, he just lights up. He whispers, Kurdistan.
Yeah.
And the insight here is that the mountains were a conservative force. They resist armies. They resist change. The jaggedness of the land created a natural fortress where Kurdish culture could survive, even when this brutal tyranny was trying to wipe it out.
So geography literally put a limit on the dictator's power. The map said, you can go this far, but no further.
Precisely. The relief map told the truth, while the political map was basically a lie.
He gives another example, this one from Europe, that I found really striking. He compares Hungary and Romania during the Cold War.
The Carpathian Divide.
Yeah, to me, I always just thought of them as, Soviet satellites. But Kaplan says geography made them totally different places to live.
It did. So Hungary is mostly the puszta, this vast flat plain. It's really exposed. Historically, it's been invaded by everyone. But because it's open, it's also open to ideas and trade from the West.
So even under communism.
Even under communism, Hungary had what they called goulash communism.
Goulash communism.
Yeah, a softer, looser version, a mix of things, But then you cross the Carpathian Mountains into Romania, and Romania is a natural fortress. It's isolated.
And that isolation allowed something worse to grow.
Much worse. Kaplan argues it allowed this really dark, strange tyranny to take root. Nicolae Ceausescu's regime was paranoid, hermetic, almost like a North Korean style of despotism right there in Europe.
But does he really think the mountains caused that? That feels a little deterministic. If you live in the mountains, you get a bad government.
It's not that the mountains create the bad government. It's that they incubate it. They create a container where a regime like that can survive without outside interference. On the flat plains of Hungary, the West was always seeping in.
But in the valleys of Romania, Ceausescu could just lock the door.
He could. Geography determined the flavor of the system.
That makes sense. It's about permeability. This leads to his point about artificial versus natural borders. We tend to think all borders are just lines drawn by politicians.
And a lot of them are. Look at the Berlin Wall. Kaplan was there before it fell, and to the people living there, that wall felt like a geological fact. permanent.
And it wasn't.
It wasn't. It was a concrete line cutting across a unified landscape. And because it was artificial, it eventually collapsed under human pressure. Compare that to, say, the Hindu Kush in Afghanistan.
Right. No protest is going to remove the Hindu Kush.
Exactly. It separates the desert Middle East from the temperate zone of Central Asia. It dictated where Alexander the Great's armies could go, and it dictated where American troops could go in 2005. That's the revenge of geography. It just outlasts all of our political experiments.
Okay, so the ground matters. I get that. But then Kaplan shifts gears from these travel stories to the big, scary chess game of global strategy. He introduces us to the visionaries. These guys from 100 years ago who looked at the map and saw the future. And the big name here is Sir Halford Mackinder.
The grandfather of geopolitics.
I'll be honest, reading this section felt like trying to learn the rules to a really complicated board game. But once you get it, you start seeing it everywhere. Can you just break down Mackinder's map for us?
Sure. So Mackinder's writing in 1904. He looks at the globe and says, forget the details. All of history is just a struggle between land power and sea power. And he identifies the ultimate prize. He calls it the Heartland.
And the Heartland is where?
It's the vast interior of Eurasia. Think Russia, extending into Central Asia. What Mackinder realized is that this huge chunk of the planet is unique because you cannot get to it by ship. The British Navy, the American Navy, they can't touch it. But it's a huge flat plain, so it was perfect for horse riding nomads, and later, perfect for railways.
He had that famous three-part warning. It sounds almost like a spell from a fantasy novel.
It really does. Who rules East Europe commands the Heartland.
Okay.
Who rules our Heartland commands the world island.
Who rules the world island commands the world. Whoa. Okay, we have to unpack world island. To me, an island is, Hawaii. What is he talking about?
He's talking about the interlinked continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa. If you look at a globe, they're all one connected landmass, the biggest on Earth. Mackinder's point was if one single power could control the resources of that entire mass, they'd be invincible.
And the Americas are just satellite islands in comparison. So let's go back to the first part of that spell. Who rules East Europe commands the Heartland? Why is Eastern Europe the key?
This is absolutely crucial for understanding so much of what's in the news today. Look at Russia's map. To the north, frozen ocean, south, deserts, mountains, east, just massive empty wilderness.
What the west?
The west,
yeah.
The border with Europe. It's a funnel. It's a flat plain that gets narrower and narrower as you approach Moscow.
An invasion highway.
A perfect invasion highway. And the traffic on that highway has been mostly one way. The French under Napoleon, the Germans under Hitler, they all invaded Russia through that flat corridor. And this created what Kaplan calls Russia's geography of insecurity.
So when we see Russia acting aggressively today, trying to control places like Ukraine, we frame it as, oh, Putin's a bad guy. But Kaplan's saying it's deeper than that.
Kaplan would argue that even if you replaced Putin with a democratic saint tomorrow, Russia would still be nervous about that western border. Because there are no mountains there to protect them, they are obsessed with creating a buffer. They need to push the threat as far away as possible.
That's actually kind of terrifying. It suggests these conflicts aren't just about who's in charge, but about a centuries-long panic attack.
It's structural. And Mackinder saw something else. He saw that the Columbian epoch, the age of exploration, was over.
The map was full.
The map was full. We're in a closed system.
Yeah.
There is no empty space left to run to, so every time a country pushes out, it pushes against someone else. The pressure has nowhere to go but back.
We're all trapped in an elevator together.
And the elevator is getting smaller. But Mackinder wasn't the only guy with a big theory. Nicholas Spikeman came a bit later, and he looked at Mackinder's map and basically said, you've got it slightly wrong. Well, Spikeman said the Heartland is actually kind of a trap. It's cold, it's landlocked, it's hard to develop. He argued the real power isn't in the deep interior, but in what he called the rimland.
The rimland. So
the edge.
Exactly. The coastal margins of Eurasia, Western Europe, the Middle East, India, China. Spikeman said these are the real power players because they're amphibious. They have access to the ocean for trade.
Right.
They also have access to the land.
So his counter theory was,
who controls the rimland rules Eurasia.
That sounds an awful lot like Cold War strategy.
It is the Cold War strategy. The U.S. policy of containment was literally Spikeman's theory in action. The Soviet Union was the heartland power trying to break out. The U.S. was the sea power trying to keep them bottled up in places like Vietnam, Korea, the Middle East.
Okay, so speaking of the U.S., where do we fit into this? We're not in the heartland or the rimland.
And that, according to Kaplan, is why the United States is the most favored state in history.
Sure.
Geographically, we basically won the lottery.
Well, think about it. We are a virtual island the size of a continent. We have two massive oceans protecting us. We have friendly, weaker neighbors, north and south. We don't have to worry about an army marching across a flat plain into Washington, D.C.
But we're not isolated. We're involved everywhere.
And that's the second part of the lottery win. We control what Spikeman called the American Mediterranean.
The Caribbean. I just think of that as a vacation spot.
Strategically, it's the key. Because the U.S. controls the Caribbean and the Panama Canal, we can move our Navy between the Atlantic and Pacific almost instantly. We can project power into the rimland, into Europe or Asia without ever being threatened at home. We get to visit the war, but we don't have to live there.
And that feels like a huge advantage. Yeah. But I have to ask, these theories, Mackinder, Spikeman, they're so cold, it's like viewing the world as a risk board. Isn't there a danger in that?
There is a huge danger, and it can be weaponized, which is why we have to talk about Karl Haushofer.
Who was that?
He was a German geographer in the 1920s and 30s, and he took these legitimate insights from Mackinder and he twinted them. He's the one who really popularized the term Lebensraum.
Live Bing space.
Yeah.
The Nazi justification for invading, well, everything.
Exactly. See, Mackinder and Spikeman wanted a balance of power to keep people free. Haushofer wanted to break the balance. He used geography to argue that Germany, trapped in the middle of Europe, had a moral right to expand and conquer. He gave a scientific-sounding reason for genocide.
So geography is just a tool. You can use it to understand why you need to be careful, or you can use it to justify being a monster.
The map is neutral. It doesn't tell you to be good. It just tells you what the board looks like.
Okay, let's bring this into the present day. We have these grand theories, but the world has changed. We have drones, cyber warfare, megacities. Kaplan talks about a crisis of room.
This brings us back to that closed system idea. A modern strategist, Paul Bracken, argues that technology has totally collapsed distance. The empty spaces that used to act as buffers, they're gone, and now everyone has a weapon.
He used that analogy about the Wild West, right? The six-shooter.
Yeah. In the Old West, the Colt revolver was called the Great Equalizer. It didn't matter if you were big and strong. If the little guy had a gun, he was a threat. Bracken says modern tech, cyber weapons, cheap drones, poor man's nukes, they act the same way.
So a small group or a small nation can now threaten a superpower. The chessboard is shrinking, all the pieces are armed,
And the pieces are standing on top of each other. That's the other huge shift, urbanization.
Right. Kaplan says the map isn't just mountains anymore. Now it's slums.
Think of a place like Sadr City in Baghdad or the favelas in Brazil. This is a new kind of terrain. It's a labyrinth of concrete and narrow alleys and millions of people. And Kaplan argues this urban terrain just neutralizes advanced military power.
You can't use a tank in a shanty town.
You can't. You can't use a satellite to see who's a terrorist and who's a baker. And he references this writer, Elias Canetti, who wrote about crowd packs. In these dense cities, people feel isolated, so they join crowds for protection. And these crowds are fueled by social media, by ideology. They become a force of nature.
So you get this paradox where states have better missiles than ever, but they're losing control of their own streets.
Exactly.
It feels overwhelming, crowded, armed, angry. Kaplan takes a really interesting turn at the end of the book, though. He goes way, way back to the ancients.
He does, and I think this is his most philosophical point. He brings up Herodotus and the story of Phidippides.
A runner.
The runner. The legend says he was running through the mountains and he encountered the god Pan. Now, we don't have to believe he actually saw a go-god. The point is, to the ancients, the landscape was alive. It was terrifying. It was full of forces they couldn't control.
He respected the map because they feared it.
Yes. And Kaplan thinks we've lost that awe. We look at a mountain and think, that'll look great on Instagram. We look at a desert and think, we can irrigate that. We treat the world like it's just stuff for us to manipulate.
And that arrogance gets us into trouble.
It does. When we forget the calm, implacable reality of geography, we make huge mistakes. We try to draw borders where the mountains say they shouldn't go. He thinks we need to recover a little of that ancient respect.
He also mentions Ibn Khaldun, the Arab historian. That idea really stuck with me, that geography actually shapes our character.
The cycle of civilization. Ibn Khaldun saw that desert nomads are tough. The geography forces them to be. They conquer the city dwellers because the city dwellers have become soft from luxury.
But then the nomads move into the city.
And within a few generations, they become soft too. And a new, tougher group comes from the desert to conquer them. It's a warning. Comfort creates vulnerability. And Kaplan is asking, as we get more virtual, are we losing touch with the hard realities the rest of the world still lives by?
Okay, so let's try to bring this all together. It feels a bit heavy. The revenge of the map, the crisis of room. Is Kaplan just saying we have no choice? That we're just robots programmed by our hills?
No, and this is the critical takeaway. He calls it probabilistic determinism.
It is a mouthful. Break it down.
Okay. Geography creates the stage. It's set of the lighting, the obstacles. If you're Poland, on a flat plain between Germany and Russia, the stage is set for tragedy. That's the probability. But human agency is the play. How we act on that stage is up to us.
So you can't change the stage, but you can write a better script.
That's it. Realism isn't about giving up. It's about accepting the constraints so you can make the smartest possible move. You can't wish the mountain away, but you can decide whether to build a fortress on it or a tunnel through it.
It's that poker analogy again. You don't choose the hand you're dealt.
But the best players win with bad hands all the time.
So here is where we leave you today. Kaplan's final thought is about that closed system. He warns that if we don't respect the map, if we keep pushing into everyone else's space without understanding their geographical fears, we're heading for a global version of the wars that tore Europe apart for centuries.
It's a call for empathy, really. Not emotional empathy, but strategic empathy. Look at the map from the other side's perspective. See what mountains they're staring at.
So next time you look at the news, whether it's Ukraine or the South China Sea, don't just look at the headlines. Pull up the relief map. Look at the actual terrain. And ask yourself, what is the landscape telling these people to do?
You might find the answers are right there in the dirt.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.